When my daughter was 3 years old, I watched her climb up these snow-covered outdoor steps. And she was up towards the very top of these steps, and I was at the bottom watching her, when she slipped and fell face first into the snow. I ran up after her to check to make sure that she was going to be okay and to comfort her. But by the time I had gotten there, she'd already wiped the snow off of her face, and she was sort of staring on her finger at this little snowflake that had landed there, exploring and kind of investigating the snowflake. This is how we learn, by falling face first into the unknown and then exploring the unknown from that vantage point. Now, fast forward 3 years, I'm sitting with Isabel, she's 6 now, and she's reading, and she's learning to read, and she's going over the words, and suddenly she hits a word that she doesn't know, and she pauses for just a moment, and then she mumbles something completely unrelated to that word and keeps going. And I stop her and I say, Isabel, sweetie, you missed this word. And she completely and totally ignores me and continues to read the sentence. Right? So then at the end of the sentence, I wait, and at the end of the sentence, I stop her again and I say, sweetie, we have to go back to that word. And she says, I read that word. And I said, no, you didn't read that word. And she says, yes, I did. And I said, no, you didn't. And we go back and forth until finally her hands are literally on her ears. She does not want to hear it. She's in fear of in fear of the unknown, the not knowing something, right? This is how we prevent learning. And it's not just Isabel. My work is with CEOs and their leadership teams. And I work with them so that they can work better together, so they could become more powerful leaders, take action that's more powerful, to collaborate in a way that allows them to achieve their strategies. And one of the first things that I do with them is I walk in and I start to ask each of them about each other. Tell me about the strengths and weaknesses of your colleagues. And then I ask this one very, very important question. I say, what are the undiscussables? The things that we will not talk about for fear that it might hurt our careers, for fear that it might make us feel vulnerable, for fear that it might expose a weakness that we don't want our colleagues to see. And I find out all of those, and I create this long list, and then I bring everybody together in a room, and possibly the most powerful meeting I ever have with them is we go down one by one each of the undiscussables, and we discuss them. Right? We talk about the things that they are too resistant, afraid, hesitant to speak about. And that there's no question that that meeting alone shoots the organization forward more than any other meeting. Because they're willing to confront, but it's a meeting, remember, that they would not have if I were not pushing them to have it. It's a meeting where some of these issues that are undiscussables would have been on their list for 10 years of things that we don't talk about, because we don't want to talk about them. My writing deals with these issues. I look at my own foibles, my own failings, and the failings of people around me. So be careful if we speak later. And what I'm going to do is I look at those and I hunt in the cracks revealed by my own incompetence for the lessons that I can learn, personal lessons, leadership lessons, managerial lessons. And this is what I've discovered. I've discovered that if we want to learn, we have to take our hands off of our ears and feel the uncomfortable emotions that naturally come along with learning. That there's no other way to learn. A friend of mine, this woman, Kathy, many years ago, I was on the beach with her, and the waves were big but not huge, and I dove in and I was playing around in the waves, and she stood right at the edge where the water met the sand, maybe a little farther in, not farther than her knees, and she stayed there. And I was calling her out and saying, come on, let's swim, it's so fun out here. And she was saying, no, I'm fine. Finally, I came out of the water. And I said, what's the matter? Like, it's so fun out there. And she says, you know what? I'm comfortable here. I don't want to go out there. I'm afraid of it. I don't want to get tossed around. I don't want to get flipped over. I'm afraid of the water. I don't want to go in. She knew how to swim. I wouldn't have pushed her if she didn't know how to swim. And she said, I'm comfortable. And I thought about that, and I thought, it's a valid choice. It's a valid choice to say, I want to stay where I'm comfortable. But it's a trade-off. And the trade-off is comfort or achieve your full potential. Comfort or achieve your full potential, because you cannot stay comfortable and achieve your full potential. You cannot stay comfortable and dive into the ocean, this mysterious, this unknown, this scary ocean, you have to make a choice. We all have to make a choice. Are we going to live our lives knee-deep in the water, or are we going to plunge in and live our lives fully immersed? That is the choice that we have to make. Rilke, in his poem, The Man Watching, describes a man in the Bible who wrestles with God. And he writes, "Winning does not tempt this man. Winning does not tempt this man. This is how he grows. By being defeated decisively by constantly greater beings." This is how we grow. By being defeated decisively by constantly greater beings. I was in a weightlifting class with an instructor named Calvin. And Calvin was great, and I really enjoyed the class and would talk to other people and have fun. And he called me after class, and it's been a while since I've been called up to the teacher after class. But he called me after class for a reason that I had never experienced before, and that reason was for not failing. He was criticizing me for not failing. And he said, "Look, you could lift those weights, and that's fine, and you can enjoy yourself, and I hope it's fun. But if you want your muscles to grow, you have to work them to exhaustion, right? You have to double the amount of weight you have, and when I tell you to do 12 reps, you have to be able to almost do 11, and the 12th one, you're using every single ounce of energy you have, and you just cannot lift that weight anymore." And that kind of failure is the failure that leads to growth. Being beaten decisively by constantly greater beings. And it's a failure that is on purpose. It is a failure, as Murmer Blakesley writes in A Conversation with Fear, intentional failure. It is not a failure of neglect. It is a failure of effort. And we all know that, right? Think back for a moment on your life, and think back to the 4 or 5 times in your life where you grew the most. Not a step, but a leap in your journey. Right? Think about those times. And I can guarantee you that 1, 2, maybe most of them will be times when you failed, when you had to face failure, and as a result, you had to push yourself to grow from that. That is, again, how we grow, how we move forward in our journeys. And I know that for a fact from my own life, from my writing. I wanted to be a writer when I was 7. Someone read my palm and told me, actually a cousin of mine who's a literary agent read my palm and told me that I would be a writer. And so I said, that's great, okay. By 10, I wrote my first book, which was a book of short ghost stories that I loved and sent to this aunt, cousin who told me that I would be a writer, who sent me a very, very sweet rejection letter. And I took it and I accepted it, and that was fine. And then I continued to write. And in school, in high school, I had usually pretty unsupportive feedback from my teachers. And in fact, now that I've been writing a bit, I was at a reunion, 25th high school reunion, and my English teacher put her arm around me and said, I'm going to take some of the credit for that. And then she left, and I turned to my friends. I'm like, are you kidding me? But she should, actually. She should, because the feedback that I got, even unsupportive, helped me continue to grow. Then I got to Princeton. I went to Princeton, and I applied to the creative writing program, not to major in it, but just to take classes in it. I just wanted to take a class. And I was rejected decisively 3 separate times over 4 years that I applied, right? In other words, the feedback I got is, Peter, you're such a bad writer, we don't think it's worth teaching you how to write. Okay, that was what I got. So then I wrote my thesis in the history department, and I wrote it and I gave it to Gloria Emerson, who was a friend, a professor, and she was an award-winning journalist during the Vietnam War, a wonderful writer. And she read my thesis, and the comment she wrote in the cover, I still remember it, and I quote you, "Thank God the history department doesn't know good writing from bad." Right? Imagine if she was not a friend. So this is the feedback. Now, 20 years later, the feedback is beginning to change, right? But I will tell you that it is still in the speeches I agonize over, the articles that I struggle with, that I grow the most. And it helps that I love writing. I don't know that I would stick with it. In fact, I know I wouldn't stick with it if I didn't love writing. Isabel taught me that. Isabel, who was struggling with these words, right? She, at one point, turned on a CD. She loved singing. She turned on the CD, and she had taken the lyrics of the music, and she was reading along with the lyrics of the music. She was teaching herself to read in an area that she loves. And now that she's gotten good enough, I can't tell you how many nights I have to walk into her room, and I know she's listening. I have to walk into her room and uncover her sheets and take the flashlight away from her because I can't stop her from doing the reading because she loves it so much, right? That is how we learn through those passions. But here is the difficult part. Those emotions, the fear that Kathy feels of jumping into the ocean, the CEO and their leadership team's resistance to being vulnerable, to showing weakness, to discussing the undiscussables, my cringing at the feedback that I get from my writing, even when I get comments on my blog, those emotions, they do not go away. They do not even get easier. They've done this research on these elite athletes who run and they bike and they work so hard that literally their faces are caked in spit. And it's caked in spit like halfway through the race. And this is an ugly image, but they can't spit out far enough because they don't have the energy, because they're using every ounce of effort that they have to propel themselves forward. So they just let the spit dribble along their faces, right? This is the image of learning, and they are asked the question, does it get easier? After your 50th race, after your 100th race, does it get easier? And the answer is, it does not get easier. But we get better at enduring it. It does not get easier, but we get better at enduring it. Sylvia Boorstein, the writer and a Buddhist teacher, tells this wonderful story of walking up to a monastery with her grandson, who was 4 or 5 at the time. And the monastery has these big steps walking up to these ominous, large wooden doors. And she takes her son and her grandson's pulling back, saying, I don't want to do it. And she turns to him, she says, what's the matter? And he says, I don't like the steps. And she answers, honey, you don't have to like the steps. You just have to climb them, right? We don't have to like these emotions, but we do have to experience them if we're going to continue to learn. I tested this by doing a 10-day silent Buddhist meditation retreat. 10 days of sitting for 15, 16 hours a day. And to break up the monotony, we would get up and meditate. Or we would walk and meditate. It was excruciatingly boring, excruciating. And yet, here was the interesting thing. I felt all of these emotions, pain, frustration, anger, joy, all of these emotions. And there's nowhere to go. You're stuck, you're sitting 15 hours a day, 9 days left, 9 days, 8 hours left, 9 days, 7 hours left. There's nowhere to go. And so you cannot help but live and experience and feel these emotions. And what you realize is that they do not kill you. What you realize is that you can experience these emotions, and they might be painful, but they go away, and they are replaced with other emotions. And those emotions will be replaced with other emotions still. And the way to be able to learn to take our hands off of our ears and endure those emotions are by practicing enduring those emotions. By turning on the TV if you're liberal and listening to Glenn Beck and seeing how that feels. If you're conservative, if you're a Tea Party activist, try Jon Stewart, that might fit. Right? And listen to them to feel what those emotions feel like, not to shut off the TV, but to endure it. Then, if that's not hard, go, if you're a pro-gay marriage activist, go have a conversation with an anti-gay marriage activist. Not to argue with him or her, not to convince them, to experience it, to see what it feels like to have those arguments, to feel that negative feeling and to see what that feels like, and to recognize that you can endure that. Know your tell. There will be a point in one of those conversations when you really want to shut your ears. I'm on the board of a not-for-profit, and I was at a board meeting, and it was a very difficult board meeting, and I spoke very strongly about a number of issues. And the facilitator afterwards came up to me and said, Peter, you should really think about how critical you've been and whether it would be helpful more to be supportive and appreciative. And I immediately got hot. Not that kind of hot, but physically, hot. I got really angry at him. And I thought, who the hell is this guy, right? He's not even a good facilitator, right? Which is why this meeting didn't go well, right? And then I had an almost irresistible urge to check my email, right? That's my tell. It's like in poker. You have a tell. When you're bluffing, people know you're bluffing. You need to know yourself when you're about to cover your ears. I get physically hot. I get emotionally angry. I invalidate the person who's giving me the message, and I want to check my email. That's my tell. Think for a minute, what's your tell? What's your indication that you're about to run? Because knowing that tell will allow you to subvert it, will allow you to sabotage your own response to prevent your own learning. Isabel, when she and I, Sophia is my 5-year-old now, Isabel is 8 years old, and Isabel, Sophia, and I went to school together, and we dropped Sophia off, the 5-year-old, in her kindergarten class. And in her kindergarten class, she was working with these patterns, and the goal, the work that she had to do was to take a strawberry, put it on a skewer, an apple, put it on a skewer, a banana, put it on a skewer, and then start with the strawberry again, right? Putting it on the skewer. And Isabel, the 8-year-old, who's in 3rd grade in the classroom next to Sophia, looked at me and said, "Daddy, I want to do this." Right? This is fun. I want to go back to doing this. And I thought to myself, we all do, right? And we can. We can. It's accessible to all of us. But in order to do it, what we have to do is to take our hands off of our ears and endure those uncomfortable emotions. The leaders, we need to discuss the undiscussables. Kathy needs to plunge into the ocean that she's afraid of. I need to continue with my writing and continue to lift weights. We have to fully immerse ourselves. And we have to continue to feel those emotions and endure them. And if we're able to take our hands off of our ears long enough and endure those uncomfortable emotions, then we'll be able to get to that place of exploration, of falling on our faces in the unknown, and then once again exploring that unknown. And the gift we will receive for that is full immersion in life. Thank you very much.